Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Making the Family Connection and Catechesis. My name is Christine Fleming-McIsaac and I am the Senior Director of Marketing Campaigns at Sadler. I'm so privileged to be joined by Kathy Hendricks, one of Sadler's national religion consultants. But that's not all. Kathy has over 30 years of experience as a Catholic school teacher, catechetical leader, and pastoral minister. She was a contributing writer for Sadler's We Believe with Project Disciple catechetical program and Gather in My Name intergenerational events. She's also the author of many books such as Prayers and Rituals for the Home and Pocket Prayers for Parents, which motivates readers and involves them through stories and anecdotes. If you want to get a regular dose of inspiration from Kathy, please subscribe to her blog, webelieveandshare.com. But today, she's here to join us and explain how the family plays a vital role in adding along the faith and how the tasks of catechesis are often carried out within the course of daily life. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping notes. Everyone is on mute to minimize the background noise. If you have questions, please type them in the chat box. We are recording today's presentation, and we will do our best, as long as technology cooperates, to get this up for you to view again and share with your colleagues. And for those of you that are live with us today and stay through the webinar, you'll receive a certificate. If you are listening to this recording, we are sorry, but you cannot get a certificate because we can't verify your attendance. So now, with no further ado, I am going to turn it over to Kathy Hendricks. Kathy?
Great. Thank you, Christine. It's great to be with all of you. I hope your fall has gotten off to a good start, and those of you involved in both school and parish have had a wonderful start to your school year. We're here to talk about family, one of my topics, and before I jump in, I would like to invite you to respond to this question. The biggest challenge we face with families, and that could be in your parish or your school, you could go ahead and type your response to that into the chat box, and we'll just kind of collect some of those responses in a couple of minutes. But it's always kind of an interesting thing to start with where you're coming from, any challenges that you face, particularly in supporting families to carry on the role as of faith formation and sharing faith in the home. I'll just walk you through a little bit of where we're headed this afternoon in the webinar. The first thing is that what I hope to do this afternoon is to connect the catechetical vision of the church with the home. And then we'll look at some, as we go through these, this vision, look at strategies for making connection with families, in between those of you with maybe with Catholic schools or within parishes. How do we do that? How do we strengthen the family connection in order to strengthen that catechetical vision in the home? And then thirdly, I'll be sharing a few observations about the World Meeting of Families, which I was privileged to attend as one of the presenters in Philadelphia. So we'll kind of do that as long as we, as I move along. So to start with, I want to look at getting, how we get in tune with families. But before I do that, I'm going to invite Christine, if you could just read some of the responses to that question about the challenges that people face with families. Have we gotten any, Christine?
Oh, we have. Thanks, Kathy. Yeah, there's some great responses. So I see communication, engaging with everyone. Busyness and overscheduled lives are another reason. Parents that are uncatechized, and family participation, that they're taking children, to CCD, but they're not involved in Mass. They don't go to Mass.
Oh.
Let's see. Sports. One person put that's a big issue now on Sundays,
Yes,
with faith.
absolutely.
the lack of interest in participating in faith formation and other involvements with the church, helping them make it a priority. Let's see. And the parents being disconnected with the faith formation process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I see a lot about competition for other things. There's just a lot going on and competition. And then that the whole family is not really involved. It's more seems to be children than for the parents.
Oh, good observation.
I think that covers a lot of them.
Wonderful. And you know, those are concerns that I do hear when I'm out speaking around the country. That idea of busyness. Sports is such a huge thing. The parishes and schools tend to be vying in a sense for people's time, and people are incredibly busy. Parents not tuned in, that sort of thing. So we'll look at that and look at then how can we you know, support families and look at how they can you know, how we can in a sense tune into where families are as well as what they might already be doing, and then how we can tweak our programs a little bit to support that. Now, as I go through, if you have any other questions, please send me in, because I'm going to take time at the end to take in some of your questions or comments as we you know, bring the webinar to a conclusion. But I want to start first of all by just sharing a little bit about the World Meeting. One of the things, you know, I've been asked a lot about what it was like to be there, and I imagine some of you that have tuned in were there in Philadelphia. I did find out afterwards that over 20,000 people were in Philadelphia. It's the largest World Meeting of Families in history. The next largest was 7,000 when it was held in Milan. So one can really understand why Pope Francis commented about Philadelphia and how exuberant everybody was. And it was indeed an incredibly exciting event to be part of, and the enthusiasm among people there was just really palpable. Certainly there's no shortage of engagement on the part of family when it comes to celebrating faith. And that was one of the most important things to me to see while we were there. But when I do travel, as I said, I do hear a lot about challenges that are faced in parishes and school, and these are stated in various ways, you know, but so much of what you all have sent in so far really does match that. And I think certainly one of the most frequent concerns from catechists, from pastors, parish catechetical leaders, Catholic school teachers, principals, and others about family is that they don't know their faith. And I want to kind of step back from that question or that observation, say, is this accurate? Or are we constrained by what we define as knowledge of the faith, which is, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the 6 tasks of catechesis.
Thank you.
Catechesis, spiritual directive catechesis, are promoting knowledge of the faith, which is of course very, very important, liturgical education, moral formation, teaching to pray, education for community life, and missionary initiation. And I like to use these, and I know we continue to unpack this wonderful document about catechesis, but what I so appreciate about the 6 tasks is their comprehensiveness, that it's not just knowing in our heads what our faith is about, but it's how we celebrate it. It's what choices we make. It's how we bring that into our prayer and interact with members of our community, and then how we spread that faith outward. I just recently published a book called Forming Families in Faith, and it really has been the culmination of years of talks and writing on the topic of faith formation in and with families. And what I've done with that and in some of my talks, take these tasks, put them in terms I think fit a little bit more seamlessly into the home. And this is what I'd call the 6 tasks of family catechesis: telling stories, celebrating rituals and traditions, making loving choices, fostering domestic spirituality, cultivating healthy relationships, and sharing, caring, and serving others. And when we're more aware of family dynamics, then our efforts at faith formation in and with families become more relevant and more inclusive. Now, I want to be clear that I'm not talking about dumping every program or model you have in place. Instead, I think what we can do is assess how we are doing catechesis, both in parish and school, and infuse it with family-friendly processes and resources. We're not going to change the reality, for example, of busy families, families involved, and so forth. We can really try to enhance, support, and affirm what families are or could be doing to share faith in the home. So I'd like to examine these 6 family tasks and then look at some strategies for supporting catechesis in the home while maintaining a connection with the parish or school. That's very, very vital. So the first one is telling stories. And at the World Meeting of Families, I was, my presentation at the meeting was on the topic of the Sacred Balancing Act, Spirituality for Busy Families. I was part of a 4-member panel, each of whom addressed this topic in different ways. So we had an hour allotted for our entire presentation, with about 7 minutes allotted to each of us to speak to this topic, and then we had some questions that were posed to us afterwards. Well, if any of you have been involved with panel or presentation, minutes speak, you know there's not a lot of wiggle room for getting into any topic in depth. And so I pondered this for a while, and I thought, well, the best way I could approach it was by telling a story about my family. So I used this photograph to kick it off. This is a picture of my children, Eric and Anna. And I told how the picture was taken while we were at the zoo one day when, of course, this is several years ago, much smaller then. And Anna fell down and hurt herself. And she turned to her brother for comfort. And I just love how Eric has wrapped her in this protective hug. And because to me, this picture speaks so much about their affection for one another and their closeness as little children. What I also love about it is the teddy bear in Eric's arm. They were always carrying little stuffed animals with them wherever they went. And so it was big part of their interaction. And so I went on and told this story, and then went on to say, and I often do this when I'm with groups talking about family storytelling, this is what I'd call a 1-minute story. And I'll bet if we had time on this webinar, I could invite you to think about your 1-minute stories in your family. You know, something that tells something about your family relationships, what you do as family, who you are as family. That's what our stories are really about in families. And they often surface at various times in family life, sometimes, many times during times of transition, as a way of remembering and affirming who we are and what we do. Our family stories also might entail extended family members, grandparents, for example, or they can even arise out of painful or challenging experiences. But family stories provide the opportunity to recognize and make connections with some of the deepest stories of our faith. Now, why stories matter so much is they've been central to our foundation of faith within families for a long time. For thousands of years, we use stories about families to understand our relationship with God. Stories mattered greatly to people of ancient times, and we know, of course, that the Bible was passed on orally for centuries before it was ever written. And what stories tend to do then is provide a context of belonging, both as part of God's household and in relationship with one another. Stories also teach us lessons about life. They often illustrate what we hold dear. I just think that picture of my children is a wonderful image for me of what we held dear in our family. One visiting us who just love being outside together, and that's a real value in our family. And so stories also help us understand ourselves, as reflect on where we come from and how we were raised. Stories then connect us with something larger than ourselves. Maybe it's our nuclear and extended families. Many people work on their genealogical stories, which connects them with their ancestors. And family stories often connect us with the world at large. We find that when one family tells a story to another family, they often find a connecting point in there. And in that way, there are powerful ways to provide a bridge to understanding others. There are some universal stories that bind us all together. And good stories stand the test of time, and so they continue to be written long past the time we think they may have ended. And so it is with the story of our faith. There's always more to the story of God's love that unfolds as we grow, if we pay attention. And, storytelling, as we do it often in families, I don't know about you, but I know that in my family we have stories that get told over and over and over again. As we do in the church, we tell our same story over and over and over again. And that repetitious nature of many family stories is reflected in the way we go about formal catechesis in the church and how we teach and share knowledge of the faith. We recount the great story of our tradition, of the mystery of creation and God's covenant with the people, of Jesus' life, teaching, death, resurrection, and ascension, of the Spirit's life-giving wisdom and presence. And each time we retell this story, we uncover layers of meaning that draw us deeper into a mature understanding of and commitment to our faith. So how do we make then that family connection with or you as catechists, catechetical leaders, Catholic school teachers, whatever your involvement in the church is? One is, first of all, encourage families to tell their stories, particularly the one-minute variety, by inviting them to pay attention to the way in which God's presence is unfolded into their everyday activities and relationships. Another is to look for connecting points between the lessons you are teaching the catechetics and the way in which they link with the stories of family life. This could entail the overall theme of a lesson, for example, forgiveness, prayer, God's love, and so forth, perhaps to a specific scripture account or catechetical goal, and then how does that connect in the family? And then the third, I think, is to generate some what I call car talk conversations, things that can stimulate conversation when the busy family is in the car, such as recall a time when, or how did your family do such and such. And sometimes all people need is a little bit of a nudge to move forward with some conversation and telling stories in their home. So it doesn't sound like something really long and involved and elaborate. All right. Okay, well, let's move now to the second family task of catechesis, which is celebrating ritual and tradition. One of the things that I find so interesting about stories is how many of them are connected to rituals. particularly those celebrated around seasons, holidays, and transitions, such as birthdays, weddings, graduations, and funerals. They're great times for stories to surface, and they do so often because of the rituals that we are celebrating. Now, when I describe a ritual, what I mean is a ritual is a patterned way of doing something that includes symbols, words, and movement, and a common history. That's certainly the way you could describe our rituals in the church, that we use great symbols. There's a symbol here of water, the water of baptism, movement and words, and in our liturgical life, and then it's universal. It's Catholic. It's used. Our symbols, our rituals are used throughout the world, and have been done for centuries. Well, what's so important about ritual is, first of all, rituals establish identity at multiple levels, especially when they're coupled with storytelling. It's kind of like, this is who we are, our family does this, and it really is an identity sort of thing. And they also convey a significant amount of information regarding family rules, roles, and values. And that information is conveyed at a verbal, nonverbal, or symbolic level. And sometimes, those symbols, they speak much louder than words. Is how we go about something and create a ritual around it. Rituals maintain stability. Think of when there is something that upsets a family, for example, or our lives, such as an illness or death. When we say we're getting back to normal, it usually means we are resuming our rituals. But on the other hand, they also allow for change. Rituals are a beautiful way to transition into something else, which is why we have such powerful rituals around times of transitions. Think of all the ritual involved in a wedding, for example, as a couple comes together and they're going to start a new life together. And so that's really good because they allow for flexibility and change. One of the most powerful aspects of rituals is how they promote healing. And in the Catholic Church, our celebration of funerals, for example, or reconciliation rituals, they're very important in terms of promoting healing. Now, families may not use such formal rituals, but there's something that does bring healing, perhaps in the way a family recognizes in some way the end of a fight, for example, or when we reconcile with one another. One of the signs of a troubled or dysfunctional family is their inability to forgive and thus to be bound by past hurts. Rituals have a powerful way of providing continuity with the past, as well as hope and expectancy for the future. And they also provide the opportunity for positive modeling. When children see what we're doing, they learn by what we're doing. And of course, in catechesis, this second task of catechesis, which is liturgical education, we learn what our sacramental rites are, our liturgical rites, and so I understand the deep concern that I hear around the country when parents are not going to Mass, because how will they, we could explain it till, kingdom come, but if people aren't taking part in that, they're really missing the beauty of the ritual and the richness of our traditions. So what do we do then to make that family connection? The Church, of course, is steeped in rituals and traditions. Catholic life is filled with that through our liturgical and sacramental life. So one of the most important things I think we can do is to emphasize and honor rituals at home. They're where we learn essentially the movement of Catholic ritual. And I grew up in a a household where we had a lot of rituals around our holidays, and in seasons, I really learned from parents what the flow of the liturgical year really meant. So that's one of the things that we can do. Another thing is to send home prayers for use at family rituals, both daily prayers for daily rituals such as grace before meals, or annual rituals, a blessing for seasons and holidays, for example. And I'm hoping that you will draw upon one of the resources that Sadler provides, which is through my blog, We Believe and Share, where there are prayers posted with every blog each week, and we archive all those prayers. So we have all sorts of prayers and blessings that you can download and send home, or just send links to families. For example, there's a blessing for a Christmas tree. Halloween's coming up. We have a Halloween blessing for children before they go out trick-or-treating. And all of these are ways to support the family in celebrating their rituals. A third way is when you're catechizing, if you have a lesson about liturgy or sacrament, or perhaps you're involved in sacramental preparation, I think one of the things I've always enjoyed about working with the sacraments is how they link with the rituals and traditions of the home. Welcoming a new baby, for example, and how that links with the sacrament of baptism. Sharing a meal at home and how that links with the celebration of the Eucharist. Offering forgiveness, for example. How families share forgiveness and forgive one another, and its link, of course, with the sacrament of penance and reconciliation. These are all ways to ground a preliminary understanding of the Church's celebration of sacraments and our understanding of sacramentality. By looking at liturgy and the sacraments through the lens of the family, the inherent connection with this second task of catechesis becomes clear. So I'll move now to the third task, catechesis, making loving choices. The third pillar of the catechism and the third task of catechesis both have to do with morality. And morality is really grounded in the catechism. Of course, on the Ten Commandments. The Decalogue forms a basic level of adherence to God's law. It's really, when you read the Catechism and you really ponder this, the Ten Commandments are less a list of rules written in stone and more a code of moral conduct that's etched on the heart, one that really grows more meaningful with the maturing of faith and understanding. And so, in the Catechism, these commandments are rooted in the Great Commandment, loving God with our entire heart, mind, body, and soul, and loving our neighbors as ourselves. An essential part of this understanding, then, and understanding morality, that it's not just the person, but that it is rooted in the common good. So, what better milieu to understand what this means, but within a family. And this is, I'm quoting myself here from my book, but I really feel strongly about this, that healthy families are ones in which each member learns to respect and value the needs of others. Truth, honesty, reverence, generosity, kindness, and love serve to counter envy, greed, selfishness, disrespect, and duplicity. And so when children are grounded in that at home, we reinforce that then when they come to school or to our catechetical programs by affirming that families are the milieu for the first education in this and first formation in this. So how then do we make a family connection? One is certainly to define and invite families to share how they live out the virtues. Now we're just on the cusp of celebrating or starting the Jubilee year of mercy. that Pope Francis has declared. It will start on December 8th and run for an entire year. And one of the most beautiful aspects of this celebration, and of course Jubilees in the Church, begin with the opening of doors. They open first the door at St. Peter's, and then there's this opening of doors in different cathedrals and basilicas around the world. It's really a powerful image and symbol, again symbol, and ritual of the opening of the door of a heart. So mercy is an incredibly important value. Generosity, kindness, compassion, justice, fortitude, all of these wonderful virtues that we celebrate in our church, and looking at and inviting families to reflect on how they live now in day-to-day life. This is what grounds us in Christian morality. Another is to look at online resources that are going to help parents guide their children in making good choices about their lives and avoid those that are harmful or disrespectful of others. One of the most cherished parts of my work, in addition to my work as a catechetical consultant for Sadler, I'm also a spiritual director, and so I direct a number of retreats for different groups, and one of my favorites is working with younger parents, particularly moms of young children. And one of the things I find is how anxious they are about how they're going to guide their children. They want to not only protect them, but they want to raise children that are good, moral human beings. And so when we can share resources with parents, we're really supporting them and affirming the things that they can do to accomplish that goal. Of course, one way to create perhaps family scenarios to illustrate the way in which a family might make good choices. There are wonderful film clips perhaps that you might use, or children's stories to draw upon, to use. Those of you that are catechetical leaders or principals, anybody that's working with parent groups, or intergenerational gatherings, for example, or in the classroom. Anything that you can use and draw upon to stress the importance of making kind and merciful choices. This is a way to accomplish this third task of catechesis, as well as to draw it into the family and then share some of those ideas with families. Moving then to the fourth task of family catechesis, which is fostering domestic spirituality. Not long ago, I was with a group of young mothers, and one of them said to me that she was, she described she was very involved in her parish. And she and her husband both were striving to make the Catholic faith a very rich part of their life and family. And then she went on to say how she felt kind of guilty because she didn't always complete the papers that her sons brought home from their catechetical program. Was it okay, she asked, to engage them in prayer together instead? And then she went on to talk about how she just tended to love to say the rosary with her children. And she said it just fit better into her family life instead of the activities on a handout. Well, needless to say, as someone who has been an author of some of these handouts for Sadler, I was a bit enlightened by this. And I'm not saying there's not a value in sending home these resources. They're very important. But we must also be aware of what works in the home, given a family's circumstances and preference. For this mother, it was a growth in spirituality and prayer that was grounded in a practice of praying the rosary. We had a really large group show up for our panel discussion in Philadelphia. We were in a room set up for 800 people, and we had an overflow crowd. They were all over the standing room only and sitting on the floor. And it was very striking to me as people kept pouring into the room that there was a great interest in recognizing and honoring the spirituality of the home. It's very, very important that we recognize this, that there is a particular spirituality that happens in the home Homes are not monasteries, and sometimes the ideas I think we share fit better in a monastery than a living room. The fourth pillar of the Catechism of the Church is my favorite. It includes a beautiful exploration of the forms, languages, and expressions of prayer, that we pray in words but also in silence. We pray with images, it's just, deep within our hearts. We pray with one another and then alone. It's just a beautiful, beautiful exploration of prayer. And I think in some ways in catechesis we've sometimes curtailed a deeper understanding of prayer by focusing in our classrooms or catechetical sessions on saying prayers. This is an important way of a Catholic way to pray, to be sure, our cherished memorized prayers and traditional prayers. But as the Catechism states, it's only one expression of prayer. In the Catechism, for example, it names 5 forms of Christian prayer: petition, thanksgiving, praise, adoration and blessing, and intercession. So when I'm out and about and I'm speaking to catechists and Catholic school teachers about this topic, I always encourage them to draw upon all 5 forms of Christian prayer whenever they're leading in prayer, because it really expands an understanding of prayer, again, not by telling them about it, but by doing it. And the same holds true in a family. Now, I would wager that the most frequent form of prayer in the household is that of grace before meals. If a family prays it all together, that's liable to be the place and time that they pray. And it is a wonderful way, again, a very natural way for families to pray as they gather around the dinner table. Something that we know is becoming less and less frequent in families, and yet still it's something that's really important. It's a way for them to express praise, to adore and bless, God and ask for blessing, and to express gratitude for the gifts they've received. So we see 3 forms of prayer folded into that one way of praying. And there also, I am finding, seems to be a resurgence of interest among younger parents in Catholic prayers and devotions, because it's very fun. So how do we make that family connection with fostering domestic spirituality? One way I'd invite you to do this is create your own top 10 list of books on family prayer. I know one of my favorite books is Prayers for the Domestic Church. I think it was published in the 1980s by Father Edward Hayes. It's still in print. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. There's a blessing of candy canes in that book. There's, it's very family friendly, and so that would be on my top 10 list. The U.S. Catholic Conference of Bishops has a book called Catholic Household Blessings and Prayers. Sadler has some wonderful books of prayer. So you might have your own list, or you could go online, talk to other catechists or teachers, people in your parish about their favorite books, or poll families, poll parents on what books they use in their home, and then send those home with the group. Another is online resources. Through what you might create or generate a text or emails periodically, particularly as the seasons approach, like a good source of prayer or a prayer for Advent and Christmas, for example, that's coming up, or Thanksgiving. Some of the most popular around these are around the liturgical year in the natural seasons. Keep in mind that our younger parents are loving apps. They're wedded to their phones. Whenever I share a resource with young mothers, for example, and I have an app to share with them, they've downloaded it by the time I finished my sentence, so they love it. Vary the forms and expressions of prayer that you use in your catechetical session, religion classes in schools, and then encourage children to share those with their families, to send home some of that. Encourage parents to take time out from technology in order to go outdoors, for example, and enjoy the gifts of God's creation. This is a wonderful way to encourage the practice of contemplation, one of the expressions of prayer in that described and defined in the Catechism. And then if you are parish catechetical leaders, principals, if you have any responsibility for gathering parents together, invite them to brainstorm ways in which they are fostering and modeling spirituality in their own lives. When we give parents an opportunity to share some of their own practices and ideas, it gets so creative and they get so excited, and of course they love it when we ask for their ideas. You could also do that as a catechist or teacher, where you just collect some of their ideas, ask them to send them to you, and then collect them together and send them out in a group email. Moving on to number 5, creating healthy relationships. I go without saying that education for community life, which is the 5th task of catechesis, begins in the home. One of the most striking things that I noticed, of course, in anybody who was there at the World Meeting of Families, was the diversity of people that were represented. Walk down a hallway, or sit in a session, and you'd hear all kinds of languages. You'd see fathers with babies and snugglies, and grandparents pushing babies in strollers, or clergy and married people, old and young, parents and grandparents. Everybody there had a connection with family in some way. And so the dynamics of family interaction teach us a great deal about those of larger communities. The United States Catholic bishops wrote a document in 1988 called A Family Perspective in Church and Society. And they describe this beautifully. A family, they wrote, is more than a sum of its parts. It is a dynamic, developing system whose members are radically interdependent. And this is very important because a system, that's what our communities of faith are really about. And our primary community then, of course, is family. Some of you noted, the lack of time families have together, and that's a real detriment to growing in faith together. And certainly as a panel in Philadelphia, we acknowledge first that families are busy. So there's such an importance in cultivating loving relationships. That's all, just as important as it's ever been, but perhaps even more important these days when families become so splintered by all their activities. But on the same hand, as much as families are busy, they're also, I find a lot of families or parents often note how isolated they feel from other families when they're on the go so much, or they're bogged down in social media and technology. That cultivation of relationships both in family and among other families is an important way to assist parents in both carrying out this task of catechesis and in becoming engaged in the life of the parish or the school. So we make the family connection, first of all, by making it a point to welcome new families into your school or parish. And you might want to revisit how your families are being welcomed. Are they being welcomed? Is it a warm welcome? Are they being encouraged to interact with one another? Are they being, are they being given opportunities to interact with one another? One of the strongest values to a parish catechetical program in the parish, for example, is the potential for creating a broader sense of community among families. And the same holds true, I think, in the school as well. And then I would say another way to is, without letting any else, but encourage families again to set aside regular family time by unplugging all the technology, turning off the TV, and spending time talking to one another, playing games, being outdoors, and participating in parish or school activities. This photograph that I've got up is a picture part of my family. It was taken at my daughter's wedding, and I love it because we're all around the table and we're not all even there, but eating together, family meals have always been a huge value in my family. And I think when families have that time together and we encourage them and support them, affirm them in doing that, we're doing much to encourage a family connection. And then providing times at parent meetings or intergenerational events for engagement with other parents and families. Sacramental preparation, for example, is a wonderful opportunity to get parents and families together for retreats or when you're having parent meetings. Try to do as much of the business stuff through email or condense it as much as possible so that you are giving more time to giving an opportunity to engage with one another. And then the last sixth task here of family catechesis is sharing, caring, and serving others. The sixth task of catechesis, which is missionary initiation, invites us to bring our faith out into the world in a spirit of evangelization. It entails reaching out to those in need, witnessing to our faith in what we both say and do, and opening ourselves further to the joy of God's kingdom. You know, we've talked a lot over the past several years about the new evangelization, but I still find that it's a tricky concept for many Catholics. We just don't tend to go out perhaps and share our faith like many of our Protestant brothers and sisters. And that it's very important to emphasize how we do that. So what is the call of the laity, particularly families in witnessing to the good news of our faith? Well, let's circle back around to telling stories. Rabbi Ramai Shapiro points out the importance of teaching children what he calls heart stories. These are stories that answer the question, what am I here to do? Heart stories open us up. They give us rise to compassion. And he writes, when compassion arises, you naturally reach out to be of service to others. And when you are of service to others, you get to know them and expand your mind. These kind of stories then are told more through witness than words. It's very powerful. I would say in my own life, I saw my parents do this through the service they rendered to our parish as well as to the broader community. My mother, for example, every week volunteered at a local hospital, and it was a very profound modeling for me in that, you know, she had children to raise, all sorts of things to do in our parish and our neighborhood, but she always found time to do this. It was a powerful example of how this task of catechesis can be carried out. So how do we make that family connection? First of all, those of you who are in leadership, I would say try to take a look at the ministries in your parish. Which ones could invite and welcome the involvement of the entire family versus simply individuals? For example, might families sign up to be greeters at Mass or take part in a social outreach project? And you might want to share ideas both with families and with your parish staffs and committees so that families aren't splintered again when they come to the parish, but have an opportunity to serve together. And then all of you, I think if you could watch, you know, many parishes and schools offer opportunities for outreach, particularly around the time of holidays, such as Thanksgiving and Christmas that are coming up. And so be sure to publicize these. Also follow up after they line up. Ask families to write about their experience, and then you can publish their experience, their little write-up in a parish or school newsletter, in the parish bulletin, or on your school or parish website. Encourage families to pray for families around the world, particularly for those in need of comfort and refuge. And right now, you know, we've got all these refugees flooding into Europe, fleeing violence, you know, what it's like for them to pull up everything in their family and to move, you know, with nothing. How our families might be supportive of other families around the world. That was one of the most striking parts of the World Meeting of Families, was we were all one family when we were gathered together in Philadelphia. and one not only with the people in Philadelphia, but with all people around the world. And then you might want to brainstorm with children how they and their families can and do carry out the spiritual and corporal works of mercy in their homes. It's a wonderful way to engage the upcoming Jubilee year of mercy. So those are some ideas for those 6 tasks of family catechesis. Let me just stop here now and invite, just maybe turn this back over to Christine, or I think maybe David has joined us as well from the Sadler home office, and see if we've had any questions sent in.
Yes, good evening. Thank you, Kathy, so much. That was amazing. My first time listening to you, and I feel so blessed. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, David.
Well, we have plenty of questions here. We do not lack questions, which is great. That means that we're listening and they were aware. And so let me start with, let me see the first question that I have here available. Because where did it go? I had it right here and then it disappeared on me. Okay, so let me go back for it. Here we go. Okay, so we have here a question from Denise, and Denise has, Pastor wants us to have parents during our RE time frame, but we can't get them to come. How do other parishes do this? We meet on a weekday. He thinks maybe Sunday mornings are better.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it is. I think it's a great idea on the idea of the pastor. It gets parents to come in from the parking lot. One of the things I did work where we did do this, and we had catechetical sessions for the kids on Sunday morning, and we had a speaker usually for the parents in the gymnasium. We were a parish for the schools, so we had a lot of opportunity of space for that, which was great. And one of the things we were very careful about, we drew about 75 to 100 people to the adult session, and one of the ways I think it worked was that we brainstormed early on before the beginning of each year to bring speakers that around topics that will appeal to parents. If we get too heavily into theology, for example, if they don't, most adults will take, they've done studies on this, most of adults will take a class or learn about something that they can apply to their lives. And so I would say for parents, you would want to look at, what are some topics that appeal to them as parents? For example, what's current right now? Parents are very concerned about their children's safety, for example. And there's ways to do that we bring in our faith. For example, that third task of family catechesis is steering their children towards good choices. So that's a way to bring that in and draw in some of that Catholic morality without making it a talk on Catholic morality, exactly like who's going to show up for that necessarily, but helping your children make good choices. And then ensure that somebody should really address the needs of families within the course of that process. I just think that really, really works. And then a lot of it is try to find somebody in your parish who's really good at marketing and helping you with good titling. I just find that in Colorado here we have a lot of large evangelical churches, and they are brilliant at coming up with really good descriptions of their programs that are so inviting and engaging. So that's a suggestion that I have for doing that.
Okay, thank you. Here we have another one, and it's from Avelina. And Avelina asks, how can we get parents to read the Bible with their children?
Wonderful question again. One of the ways I would suggest, first of all, is with young children to get a children's Bible with some nice illustrations. I know with my children, and my children are adults now, but they loved reading it, and it was something that they could understand. So, just that's one way, of course, is using a children's Bible. Another is to use the year. On our Sadler website, you could go to sadlerreligion.com and go into the We Believe link, and there's a link to our liturgical year, and reading the readings from the Sunday liturgies. They're a wonderful way. I often encourage parents to do that if they're concerned about their kids don't pay attention at Mass, is to read the readings with them prior to coming to church, and then the kids have an understanding. On that website we have a link to all the readings that come from the U.S. Bishops' Conference, and then there's activities for younger children and for older children. So that's another way, is to link it to the Sunday readings.
Beautiful. Brenda says here, what was the name of her #1 book for family prayer?
Prayers for the Mystic Church, and the author is Edward Hayes, H-A-Y-S. It's a real classic, and I'm sure you can get it through Amazon. It's just a beautiful book.
Beautiful. Daniel says here, as a confirmation teacher, I am disturbed by how many of my students and their families do not attend Mass on Sundays. How can we encourage these students to get their parents to go to Mass?
Oh, that's really good. I've heard all sorts of things that parents have to bring bulletins signed, from Mass. And I don't think coercion is the way. I think invitation is the way in engagement. You might, for example, encourage families to attend together. I mean, if you have any kind of parent gathering, and invite them to come and sit together, and then maybe have something before or after, perhaps with food that will bring them together, and maybe break open the readings or something. I think sometimes families, they're very busy, and I don't know that they're unengaged because they don't care. But it's just that they have found better community in their sports teams, which is sad to say. But if there's not a welcoming sense in the parish, then I don't know that people will attend. It's one of the things that surfaced in the Pew studies on either people's involvement in religious institutions, and the #1 thing was whether they felt welcomed. So any ways in which you can try to build some small community in working with parents around confirmation, when you gather parents together, and then, like I said, invite them to attend together or sit together with another family, or so that they have some sense of a connection with the parish. I so wish I had a magic answer to that. I really don't, but I think the best we can do is to keep inviting, encouraging, perhaps having the pastor come and speak to the family, the parish priest, involving, in encouraging the kids to get involved, perhaps, maybe through singing or reading. Parents often will show up because their child's involved, so that's another possibility.
Okay. Diane says, asked, are they? Do you have any book recommendations listed on your blog, Kathy?
I haven't had books listed on my blog. I often do that when I'm giving talks because I love to read. Yeah, but I don't really have them listed on the blog.
Okay. Is there a video we can purchase that explains how to connect with the family, which can show our faith formation teams?
To connect the family. Well, this presentation, I don't know whether this is what you're referring to, but this presentation will be archived, so this webinar would be something you can share with the team. And we'll have some other webinars that you might want to check out. I know Tom Quinlan from the Diocese of Joliet, has done some webinars on family for us at Sadler. So be sure to check our Sadler website. That would be online. They're not videos, of course. So other than that, I don't really have any particular videos that I could recommend at this point.
All right. Let's. It says here, Warren. What are some strategies parishes can take to empower fathers and mothers to be spiritual leaders within their homes, regardless of their experience and formation? These are good questions.
They're wonderful questions.
Yeah, they are.
Lauren, thank you.
I'm glad I'm not you, Kathy.
Well, one of the things I always tell, one of the things I love to do with parent groups is I have my mother's prayer book. I usually bring it. My mother used to pray every night on her knees. Well, both of my parents did. My dad did too, but Mom had a prayer book, and she would kneel by her bed every night and read from this prayer book. And she used it so much as a rubber band around it that keeps it together. And I always show parents this and say, you know, my mom and dad, I don't ever remember them telling me to pray or teaching me to pray per se, but I saw them praying, and it had a tremendous impact on me and on my siblings. And so I think that one of the ways is to encourage modeling. Robert Fulgham in his book, Everything I Really Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten, once wrote, don't worry that your children don't listen to you. Worry that they're always watching you. And so that's one strategy, is to really encourage them to maintain a prayer life of their own and to understand that their kids are watching them. Providing resources for parents to pray that are fitted to the home. You know, daily prayers, sort of things that are easy to use but don't take a whole lot of time, for example, in the morning or in the evening. Just when children see their parents engaged in prayer, you know, another thing that my parents used to do is whenever there was a crisis in our family, they used to go to a nearby Carmelite monastery and ask the sisters for prayers. And I always thought, wow, we're in, you know, something serious is going on because Mom and Dad are bringing out the big prayer guns, as I call them. But that's another thing that made an impact on me, that they were always asking for prayer from other people. And that was really a powerful thing. So modeling, praying, making prayer part of their lives, even it's very, very minimal. But, you know, as I heard one priest say once, the most important thing is that you pray. You know, it's not how long or how often, but it's just that you do it. So.
Right. Well, let's do one more. Yeah?
Okay. Very good.
All right. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What can we do to lead family members to conversion and come back to the church?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I told you.
Yeah, that's a very good one. You know, one of my favorite lines about evangelization is from Pope Francis, and he said we should not coerce people or proselytize. We should invite, engage, and attract them. And I think the best is that, is your parish joyful? Is your school joyful? Is there a joyful aspect around being prayerful? You know, I remember once thinking about a woman in our parish who, well, I've told this story many times to parent groups, but when I was a little kid, I used to go to Mass every day because I went to Catholic school, and I would watch one of my mother's friends, Coughlin, come back from communion, and she always had this most beautiful look on her face. I remember as a little child, I wanted what Mrs. Coughlin had. And so that's part of that attraction. I think Pope Francis attracted so many people when he was here in the United States through his joy, his engagement, his compassion and mercy. And so we witness much more through what we're doing than what we're saying. And so any ways in which you become that agent of evangelization by showing that your faith means so much to you and you're sharing that with children, you will attract people. You'll engage them, you'll intrigue them, and that's, I guess that's the best answer I can come up with.
That was good. Well, thank you so much, Kathy. you once again, yes. Thank you so much. You did. Believe me, I'm happy it was you that was answering these questions because they were really good questions and very well thought out. Thank you to all the listeners and people that were on the webinar. And just to remind everyone that if you know someone that wants to listen, the webinar will be in our webinar section on the Sadler page. And as Kathy said before, there are also other resources that are available. So please, check out the list and just know that we also are working on that section on the website to make it easier to navigate. But all the resources are there, and they're amazing resources that can help you grow in your faith and also help you engage other people as well.
Wonderful.
So any last words, Kathy?
Well, I thought we could close with a prayer for families from my blog. This is available to be downloaded, but I wrote this prayer in the spirit of the Holy Family, so I thought it would be a nice way to close our session today. So let us pray. Loving God, in the spirit of the Holy Family, we ask for your blessing on all families. Let Mary's openness to your wondrous ways be an inspiration to place all trust in you. Let Joseph's courage provide hope during times of anxiety and uncertainty. Let Jesus' life ignite all families with the spirit of light and love. May the grace that encircled the Holy Family widen to embrace all families. For this we pray. Amen. And thank you all for being part of this webinar.
Good night. Thank you, and God bless.
All right. Good night. Thank you.
Amen. Bye.
Bye.